A respected federal judge is wrongly detained during a late-night rest stop, his reputation threatened by officers who twist procedure for their own pride. Connor Bates and Nolan Hill, trusted to uphold the law, instead use suspicion and power as weapons, challenging the very ideals they were meant to protect. When a hidden recording falls into the hands of relentless agent Ellie Stevens, the truth finally comes to light, turning the tables in a fight for justice. But just wait for the dramatic upheaval that follows, and see how fairness triumphs when courage refuses to back down. Joseph Miller eased his sedan into a remote rest stop along Interstate 70 just after dusk, his mind still lingering on docket notes and the distant voices from his last court session. He was a man whose daily life revolved around constitutional principles and the measured calm of the courtroom. Yet tonight, away from the marble halls and their familiar order, anxiety gathered quietly in his chest. He parked beneath a sputtering street lamp at the far end of the lot, the only car in sight save for a weathered station wagon belonging to a family finishing dinner at a picnic table. Joseph needed only a few minutes to return a call from his chambers in Washington, yet even as he dialed, he watched headlights sweep across the rest stop entrance. The slow roll of the police cruiser did not immediately concern him. He believed in the decency of law enforcement, just as he believed in due process. But as the patrol car pulled up behind him and didn't move on, Joseph felt a sliver of uncertainty catch in his thoughts. Two officers, Connor Bates and Nolan Hill, stepped from their vehicle. Their approach was swift and assertive, with Bates leading, his hand casually resting near his belt. Hill hung back, thumbs looped in his utility vest, eyes scanning the area in wide, deliberate arcs. As Joseph ended his call and gathered his things, Bates demanded with a practiced professionalism to see his identification and registration. Joseph provided his license and explained, with careful courtesy, that he was a federal judge on his way home from an official function. Instead of easing the tension, the admission sharpened it. Bates regarded Joseph for a moment, suspicion in his eyes, then asked him to step out of the car. It was not a request, more the command of someone who expected compliance. Joseph complied, though his nerves buzzed with a private indignation. He thought of the men and women whose liberty he'd considered in court, how the smallest misunderstanding or the slightest wrong tone could alter lives irrevocably. Now, standing in the chill wind by the trunk of his car, Joseph felt the weight of not only his office, but of the vulnerability that came from being powerless before authority. Hill, meanwhile, circled the vehicle, light flicking beneath the seats and across the dashboard. Bates questioned Joseph about his route, why he had stopped, and why he had come alone. His voice rose with each inquiry, the questions morphing into insinuations. Joseph tried to remain composed, answering each point precisely, drawing on the patience learned from years on the bench. Yet the sense of order, so vital in his world, slipped further away. The officer's posture shifted from investigatory to adversarial. Bates's tone turned sharp and accusatory, brushing aside Joseph's explanations. Neighborhood gossip and innuendo shaped his remarks. "You judges think you can do whatever you want," Bates muttered just loud enough for Joseph to hear, a remark prohibited by training but difficult to prove. By now the family at the picnic table was hastily packing up, the tension in the air as tangible as the cold. Hill produced a notepad, ostentatiously jotting down details as Bates pressed Joseph to answer again and again why he was traveling at this hour, whether he had consumed alcohol at dinner, and why he looked nervous. Joseph, caught between confusion and a growing sense of outrage, began to glimpse the shadow side of power he had previously seen only from the bench. Bates insisted that Joseph sit on the curb while they sorted things out. For a half hour, Joseph sat in the chilly dark, shivering more from indignation than the temperature as traffic rumbled by. He watched Hill take a sweeping video of the scene with a phone, then disappear into the black and white cruiser, presumably to search on Joseph's name. Through the open window, Joseph could barely make out the officer's conversation. Fragments reached him. "Let's make sure it's all by the book. Can you imagine him on the news? They always play the victim." He understood with dawning frustration that his word meant nothing to them. His authority here amounted to far less than theirs. Finally, after what felt to Joseph like an eternity, Hill approached and said they found nothing suspicious. Bates returned his documents, recited a formulaic statement about random checks for public safety, and left him with a final admonition to drive safe and be careful out here. There was no apology, just an absence where dignity and professionalism should have been. Alone again, Joseph remained seated for a long while, hands gripping the edge of the curb. He stared at the shadows cast by passing trucks and realized with a mix of disbelief and gathering resolve that the night had become a dividing line, a memory he would not soon leave behind. The rest stop grew quiet. The last echo of police radios faded, leaving Joseph in the silence, certain that the encounter was only the beginning of a much deeper reckoning. News of the rest stop incident started as a distant ripple, a minor headline tucked between weather reports and political commentary. Most readers glossed over the anonymous claim of unusual police conduct late at night. Only a handful noticed an unnamed federal judge was involved. But within Joseph Miller's world, the impact struck hard and deep, unsettling forces that had long seemed untouchable. The courthouse in Washington, normally a fortress of discipline and order, buzzed with quiet speculation. Colleagues debated in hushed voices whether the story was real or exaggerated. Some expressed disbelief that Miller could ever find himself in such a position, while others wondered privately what he might have done to cause suspicion. Joseph, meanwhile, was summoned to an urgent internal review. The administrators, stern-faced and meticulous, demanded he recount every detail of the incident, as if his decades of service and careful judgments had been erased overnight. His professional pride dissolved into a growing sense of isolation, as his answers, methodical, honest, precise, were received with skepticism rather than trust. Outside the courthouse, the stir grew wider. Social media filled with questions and rumors, amplified by those who distrusted authority and by anonymous accounts seeking attention. Some voiced support for the unknown judge. Others accused him of arrogance or wrongdoing, and still others used the story to fuel debates about the fairness of the legal system. Clips from the officers' body cameras, shared without context, generated heated arguments. The footage showed nothing criminal, only an uneasy encounter, but the tone of the questions and commands told a story of quiet humiliation and invisible lines crossed. For those who watched, it was easy to pass judgment without understanding the weight of what had truly happened. Joseph's usual confidence, built through years on the bench, began to crack. Each day he endured sidelong glances from colleagues and neighbors. Friendly greetings turned into uncomfortable silences. He worried what his family and close friends thought after seeing the story replayed endlessly on local channels. At home, the phone rang with calls from journalists eager for a statement. He declined them all, knowing that anything he said could be twisted or misrepresented. In these heavy days, Joseph often replayed the events at the rest stop in his mind. He questioned his every answer and move. Should he have tried harder to explain, pressed for his rights more forcefully, or simply left as soon as the officers arrived? Doubt became constant, and the realization that a single moment could so suddenly and so completely overshadow a lifetime's work was a weight he had never borne before. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Connor Bates and Officer Nolan Hill defended their actions. At the police department, Bates wrote a report framing the encounter as a model of professionalism, emphasizing public safety and suspicious behavior. When asked about the judge's injuries, he deflected blame, attributing everything to technically correct procedures. Their superiors, eager to avoid scandal and public scrutiny, supported their narrative. The official account cited protocol and respect for the law, leaving out the moments of impatience and the dismissive attitude that lingered on the body cam footage. Unbeknownst to Bates and Hill, a separate investigation was quietly launched. Federal agent Ellie Stevens, seasoned and unassuming, was handed a fragment of the original wire recording after a digital backup surfaced in a routine audit. She listened closely, familiar with the subtle signals that separated routine policing from something more troubling. On the tape she heard a different story, one not of calm professionalism, but of casual disregard and rising hostility. The pain in Miller's voice, the edge in Bates's remarks, and the faint background laughter that wasn't meant for the public ear all betrayed cracks in the official version. Ellie understood the stakes. If this were the whole truth, then the consequences would not rest with a single night or a single man's reputation. Quietly, she began to gather records of previous complaints involving Bates and Hill cases closed too quickly, reports filed with just enough detail to please superiors, but never to stand up under real scrutiny. Patterns started to emerge, threads linking incidents dismissed as routine to a more disturbing pattern of behavior. Each piece of evidence made it harder for her to look away. For Joseph, the world grew smaller each day. As hope waned, the loneliness deepened. He clung to routine, finding solace in the measured rituals of his work, in the order of statutes and precedent. He prepared responses for every possible question, bracing for the next wave of judgment from both strangers and friends. The city outside kept moving, judges held hearings, police cruisers idled at crosswalks, citizens argued over headlines, but for Joseph, time narrowed to a tunnel lit by uncertainty, regret, and the vague, receding hope that someone would recognize the truth. Barricaded by suspicion, pain, and relentless public scrutiny, Joseph watched the world reframe the meaning of justice. Even as his own reputation seemed to waver, he clung to the faint light of possibility that somewhere, someone would listen to the evidence and see beyond the surface. Ellie Stevens worked late into the night, her office illuminated only by the glow of a computer monitor and the scattered reports across her desk. She was known among her colleagues for her commitment to truth and careful attention to detail, qualities that had guided her through complex investigations in the past. Her determination grew stronger as she pieced together the fragments left by the official accounts surrounding Joseph Miller's case. Ellie started by reviewing complaints linked to Officers Bates and Hill. Their files revealed a pattern, minor violations handled quickly, records that barely met departmental standards, and statements from citizens who felt unheard. Each new discovery reinforced her belief that what had happened to Judge Miller was not an isolated mistake, but part of a repeating problem. She contacted Joseph, arranging a confidential meeting in a quiet neighborhood cafe. The judge's composed demeanor concealed exhaustion, a reflection of the toll taken by recent events. Ellie presented the evidence-gathered audio clips, reports with inconsistencies, and unpublished body cam footage. From these materials, a clearer picture began to form. Moments of undue suspicion, procedural shortcuts taken during stops, and remarks that undermined the ideals both men had sworn to protect. Their investigation gained momentum. As Ellie and Joseph worked together, they encountered resistance from officials wary of questioning respected officers. Records were slow to arrive, and some consultations were met with vague assurances that the situation was under control. Still, Ellie pressed forward, often losing sleep to ensure no detail was missed. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Ellie retrieved a deleted wire recording from a backup system, a file nearly lost in routine data management. In this recording, the officer's conversation revealed intentions that ran counter to agency values, dismissive language, laughter, and an acknowledgement that Joseph's position made the incident one to watch. For Ellie, the evidence was irrefutable. With the new findings secured, Ellie and Joseph submitted their report to an oversight committee, requesting a formal review. The news spread quickly among those tasked with upholding justice. Discussion at the highest levels shifted from skepticism to urgent concern. Inquiries were made into past cases handled by Bates and Hill, and public advocates demanded accountability. The public, previously divided by speculation and incomplete stories, began to reconsider their attitudes. Those who had doubted Joseph's character saw the mounting evidence and recognized the vulnerability behind the office he represented. Others voiced gratitude that the system contained individuals willing to seek truth despite obstacles. Through long days and quiet nights, Joseph found a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that justice was not always immediate or easy. It required perseverance and trust. The combined efforts of Ellie and Joseph revealed patterns long ignored, and others within the agency joined in to support transparency. By the time their findings reached review, the momentum was undeniable. Officials recognized that Joseph's experience challenged more than a single encounter. It reflected the responsibility shared by everyone within the system. Their investigation, rooted in careful research and unwavering integrity, opened the way for genuine change. In the end, the evidence spoke not only for Joseph, but for all those whose voices risked being overshadowed. Ellie's quiet determination had turned doubt into clarity, and Joseph's willingness to confront adversity inspired others to defend the principles at the heart of the law. Their partnership, built on trust and persistence, became an example for those who believed in true justice. The morning of the hearing arrived with a sense of urgency that radiated throughout Washington's legal district. Reporters assembled outside the commission building long before sunrise, some seeking exclusive statements, others simply hoping to catch a glimpse of those involved in the case that had captured national attention. Joseph Miller dressed in quiet reflection, knowing he was not only defending his own reputation, but representing the ideals of justice for everyone whose trust depended on the system's integrity. Inside, the chamber filled with spectators, judges, attorneys, citizens, and advocates, each aware that the day's proceedings would resonate beyond these walls. The tension was palpable as the committee chair called the hearing to order, reviewing the findings submitted by Ellie Stevens. Crucial among them was the wire recording, now authenticated and restored to clarity. Audio experts played segments for the panel, every word echoing in the silent room. The casual tone, the remarks that contradicted official reports, the evidence of intent that went against departmental standards. Officers Bates and Hill listened with uneasy stoicism, their faces revealing traces of regret as the recording made its impact. Legal counsel tried to refute the evidence, questioning the interpretation, but the clarity of the audio and the supporting documentation left little room for doubt. Public defenders spoke to the broader issues the case had exposed: accountability, transparency, and the need for ongoing oversight in all branches of law enforcement. When Joseph rose to give his testimony, the chamber quieted again. He described not only the events of the rest stop, but the aftermath days marked by suspicion, distress, and the threat of lost dignity. Yet his tone was measured and resolute. He spoke not of personal vengeance, but of collective responsibility. His message was clear: justice is strongest where it is paired with humility and equal protection, and every action taken in the name of law carries consequences not only for individuals, but for the trust between authority and the community. Ellie observed as members of the panel questioned both sides. She reflected on the journey that had led her here, from the painstaking searches through records, the challenge of navigating internal resistance, to the silent support received from citizens who saw the value in her work. The case was no longer just about one judge and two officers. It had become a catalyst for examining how institutions respected their purpose. Deliberations were long and meticulous. After hours behind closed doors, the committee returned with its decision. The officers were found to have acted outside established protocols and failed to uphold the values the public expected. The disciplinary measures were significant suspension from duty, mandatory training, oversight by independent review boards, and a public statement acknowledging their errors. Joseph's record was cleared and his position reaffirmed. Instead of celebration, there was solemn appreciation for the strength and vulnerability shown throughout the proceedings. The Commission announced new procedures for transparency, vowing to improve communication channels and protect the rights of both officials and citizens. As the building emptied, the city's legal community reconsidered the meaning of justice. Courtrooms across the country reviewed their own standards. Police departments organized workshops on ethical conduct and respectful engagement. Citizens wrote editorial pieces, some offering critiques, others expressing hope that the process could be replicated elsewhere. Joseph returned home that evening, mindful of the impact his experience had on others. He wrote an open letter to his peers, sharing insights learned from vulnerability and perseverance. His words encourage patience, integrity, and the courage to stand for what is right, even when the outcome is uncertain. Ellie, too, continued her work, inspired by what had been achieved. She quietly recognized that systemic change did not come easily, And yet every case resolved with honesty brought society closer to the ideals it professed. For the countless individuals who followed the story, the conclusion marked more than an end. It was a beginning, a reminder that justice could be challenged and renewed, that resilience and truth could restore dignity, long thought lost. Through Joseph and Ellie's persistence, the city found a measure of hope, and the echo of their journey lingered in every place where fairness, accountability, and compassion mattered.